What do you want to do? You ready?
Hold on, let me just look up one last thing.
Check your fact and let me know.
Okay, I'm good. I didn't find it, but I'm going to roll without it. Black Girl Magic.
What's good, everybody? Steve Discourse.
What's up, y'all? It's Jay Callie.
What's the deal? Back again for 2019. We took a break over the holidays to just recharge, do some weekend day trips and everything. I know you have a lot going on the weekends.
Yeah,
so,
I got some stuff to do today.
Yeah, we needed to just take a quick break. So we're back, and honestly, there's two main stories that we kind of had to focus on today.
Yes.
Because it's been on everybody's minds, and if you have been dying to hear what we have to say about this, we're back to finally tell you. So, of course, we're going to have to talk about the government shutdown.
It's necessary.
Because that's a lot of shenanigans. Record-breaking shutdown.
I got the deets.
America's great again. Setting records. We're setting records, baby.
I feel like that's always been the motive. Like, let's just at least rock it out until we break history.
Right. So we're breaking our own records. I don't know any other country can mess with us with this long of a government shutdown. They probably can. There might be some
I feel like
governments
there's some
in turmoil out
dictatorships
there.
out there.
So, okay. We're getting off script now. All right, yeah, so we're going to come back to the government shutdown. The other story that we really have to talk about that's kind of going to be hard to ignore is, well, I'll let you. This is where we're going to start today.
I'm just going to come
Callie.
right out the gate and tell you what the struggle is for me. We have to talk about rape culture in America because it's just a conversation that's on everybody's tongue right now. And, like, I know that I have a lot that I would like to say about it, and hopefully people have ears that they would listen to my opinion. I was trying to figure out a way to go about doing this without saying the name of he who shall not be named. But just so that the people out there know where the context of this conversation started, I'm going to say the name one time. There was an R. Kelly documentary that came out last week that exposed a lot of, like, the sexual trauma that he went through and a lot of the sexual trauma that he put other people through. Got that out the way. That opened up the conversation of Americans talking about, well, what does it actually mean for a minor to be engaged in sexual activity with an adult person? Can it be consensual? Is it always abuse? Is it always sexual trauma? Like, and to me, the answer to that is yes. Like, it is always some form of sexual manipulation when a minor, and I'm talking about someone who's 12, 13, 14, even all the way up to the age of 17, honestly, is engaged in, a sexual relationship with someone who's 10, 15 years older than them. Someone who's freaking 5 years older than them. That's a big age gap for a teenager. So anyway, yeah, what people have been saying is America is known for sweeping these instances under the rug when people voluntarily sacrifice their children, like saying, oh, I thought that they were going to get a record deal if I took them to the studio 3 days a week and dropped them off. No, you knew because everybody knew that this person was committing acts of sexual violence. Or when people say, oh, I dropped them off to be babysat by my uncle, but I never knew that he would touch them like that. Somewhere in the back of your mind you knew. Or when your child comes to you and says, hey, this person is touching me, you don't listen to them. Those have been the types of conversations that have been happening.
Well, yeah, I mean, on that point, yeah, I think if your kids say anything, signal anything that they're uncomfortable, you should probably just ride with them 100%. And if they say they're uncomfortable, that needs to be the overriding priority. I mean, if you're leaving them with family, maybe because you need to, because you have work and you need support and babysitters or whatever, that can be hard. But at the same time, yeah, kids tend to. I mean, yeah, kids say a bunch of wild stuff because they make believe and they're kids, they're learning and they make up stories and this and that in general. But in cases like this where they're telling you, like, for their own personal space and safety, they don't feel comfortable, I think you need to just, because if that's just something that they don't realize what they mean and they're saying and it's not coming from a truthful place, so be it. But if it is and you ignored it, that's a major problem. So in these cases, you definitely have to look into that.
I mean,
how do you do that? How do you do that though? If kid says I'm uncomfortable going over here, how do you what would you even do?
You don't take them there anymore.
Just don't.
I mean, it doesn't seem like a complicated thing. If my child, I don't have any kids, but if I did and they came up to me and said, this person is touching me, it's over. You know what I mean? And of course, kids can make stories up, but the chances of if your child even feels like they need to tell a story like that to get away from a person, then there is something going on.
Yeah, fair
A kid
enough,
isn't just going to say, "Oh, this person has been touching me and doing these things," just because grandma makes me eat greens and I don't want to go back to grandma's house. That isn't really likely. You get what I'm saying? So a lot of these people that were in this documentary expressed some sort of like, oh, well, I just didn't know. I had no idea. When it's like you have to find the signs of abuse and then you have to like act on them, especially if those signs are someone verbally and explicitly saying, hey, I'm being sexually abused. You cannot choose to sweep that under the rug because of the possible benefits that could come from continuing to send your child or your teenager to this place. It's really unhealthy and it's really unsafe. And the people are questioning then like, well, do black girls actually matter to you? Because most of the R. Kelly victims are black girls, which is, well, that's the conversation I'm hearing because that's my circle. I'm sure there's a greater conversation going on outside of just black girls. But yeah, and the other piece of that is a lot of women have been going online and sharing stories of when they were minors or when they were teenagers and they were engaged in what some might consider a consensual sexual relationship with men who are much older than them, and how the adults around them kind of saw what was happening and knew what was going on and encouraged her and didn't stop it. And they're like, wow, I was 15 and I was in a relationship with a 25-year-old man, and at that age I didn't know how wrong it was, and looking back I'm disgusted by everybody who enabled that relationship. And really just calling people out like, you were there, you were present, my brother, my aunts, my uncles, everybody knew my boyfriend was 25 and no one pulled me and told me it was wrong. So now you see this victim blaming of people saying, oh, she knew what she wanted, she knew what she was doing. A minor cannot give consent to an inappropriate sexual relationship with a grown adult person who knows that it is wrong. I don't care if you think they're giving consent. And just the mere fact that so many women are looking back going, I wish I knew at that age how wrong it was. I wish I knew that my boyfriend was actually just a sexual predator. Like, this is crazy. So I'm like, if we know that now, later in life, so many people look back and say, no, that was wrong, how can we still be having the conversation about, oh, she gave consent? It's not legal, and that person isn't mature enough to give consent to that type of a situation. So that really opened up my mind to a new story that's not a new story, an old story that's re-emerged in the news this week, the story of Centoya Brown. Some of you may know or may not. Centoya Brown's story made a lot of headlines and made a lot of waves starting around last year or 2 years ago. She was 16 years old when she killed a man who tried to purchase her for sex. And she was sentenced to 51 years in jail, which meant, you know what I'm saying, likely she would have never got out. And a lot of people who, once they heard the news, started rallying. Celebrities got behind her, and people were calling for clemency, calling to get her released from jail because, again, she was a minor. She was a victim of sex trafficking, and she was put in jail for basically defending herself, where she said this man tried to take advantage of her when she didn't want to do something that he wanted to do, and she killed him. A few weeks ago, Centoya Brown was granted clemency. She's set to be released in August of this year. Yeah, a few days ago. Thank you. She's set to be released in August of this year, and that's like big news. Everybody's celebrating, and they're like, wow, finally a breakthrough. Like, this girl who didn't deserve it, her voice has been heard, and we've made waves. But it's important to know that Centoya Brown is not the only minor. Well, she's no longer a minor because this happened years ago.
Yeah, I mean, the trick about that is what is happening, I think, in the minds of juries, that they could see this. And I mean, now granted, the way lawsuits and trials play out, you know, there's a lot of positioning and slick moves on both sides. Not to say they're right or wrong, but that's what lawyers have to do on both sides. They have to find ways to bend everything to work for them. But I mean, we weren't in there as jurors, but you got to think that signals something is really subtle in the minds of Americans, that you can hear this whole context and still place the blame on her. When she was in the middle of being assaulted, she was not, all right, case in point, I was reading another story about a woman in the last couple of months, and she killed her customer, similar to Centoya Brown, but the difference is she went over there, like she took Uber, Lyft, went all the way out of the way to go to his house, killed him, and set the house on fire. And the big difference is Centoya Brown was forced into this interaction with this man who she had been forced to interact with before, and in the midst of that interaction, killed him. And the fact that people can look at this and see a young girl forced to be in a situation which is clearly illegal by all means necessary, and still call her, a murderer is nuts. And we got a long way to go, I think, from men. I mean, let's just say it, from men, we have a long way to go to own up to a lot of the horrific shit that we do. Like, even just having that doubt in our mind, like that signals a massive way that we need to shift our whole default mental state.
I'm going to tell you something that I realized this week. You're right. There is a long way to go for men, but we have a long way to go as a society overall, because there are a lot more women out there who I would consider to be rape apologists than what I previously believed. With this conversation that's been happening all over the internet has opened my eyes to just how many older women, younger women in general would say, no, I actually don't see a problem with that. No, maybe these girls are just fast. No, maybe. And I'm like, wow, I just was stunned this week.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
But there's a greater conversation outside of the Cyntoia Brown case, and that conversation is just the way that we view prostitution and sex work and sex trafficking in the United States of America. There are places where these jobs overlap, but there are places where they're totally separate and they're totally different. And it's problematic that we look at prostitutes and say, oh, this is illegal, put them in jail. That's our response. They go to jail, whether they're minors. If you get caught up in prostitution at 16, you're going to jail. We have to be able to differentiate between sex work and sex trafficking, because that's where the biggest blurry line came in the Cyntoia Brown case. Sex work is something that people enter by choice. I want to have sex for money, or I want to have sex for things, or for whatever reason you choose to involve your body in your line of work. That is sex work. Sex trafficking is when someone is put into this field of work by force. Many women who we know as sex workers or prostitutes are being sex trafficked. And in my opinion, every single minor in that field is being sex trafficked, because, again, I don't think they can give that type of consent to older people who are manipulating them. It's very important that we differentiate and that we find a new way to approach sex work in the way that we handle it, because putting people in jail is just not an option, especially when they're already 9 times out of 10 victims.
One thing that I don't know about is how much obligation or how much work does law enforcement put in when they pick up a minor or anyone for prostitution and sex work, right? How much work do they put in to find out really the source of that? Because minor or an adult, someone can be coercing you into that situation, right? So we might really, as a society and as, police officers specifically, have an obligation to do a lot of homework and really find out why that person's out there, because there can also be legal sex work and that, or not legal, but because it's illegal in the country for the most part, but there can be legitimate, for lack of a better word, people can do it voluntarily. And so if that's the case and it's illegal, then all right, well, you got caught up. But if you have people threatening violence and your general welfare forcing you into that, I think that's a perfect opportunity to say, okay, well, we're not really going to hit you with this charge because we need to find these people who are forcing you and other people into it.
I think
so. We've got a real responsibility there as well.
Well, that's a great idea, but you know what? The thing that makes that difficult is, one, it is illegal, and it's illegal in every single state except for Nevada. But two, the lines get very blurry because there are people who enter the field of sex work voluntarily, and statistics show that many of those women become victims of sex trafficking later, meaning they no longer want to do sex work because they have a pimp or because they have these clients who forcibly, throw themselves at them all the time. They now no longer have an option to leave, so now they are being sexually trafficked. There are also people who enter just straight out the bat being sex trafficked as minors, and then they grow up, years and years spent in the field to the point where they're so manipulated that they don't have any other options or know any other way out. So then it seems like it's voluntary, but it's not. So the lines are very blurry.
Well, yeah, no, they're definitely blurry. So I'm not going to draw a distinct circle around any one person or anything. But the point is, there's nothing wrong inherently, in my mind, people may disagree with me, but there's nothing wrong inherently, I don't think, with selling sex, doing sex work.
No.
The only problem in my mind arises is it being done ethically, right? Are you being forced for whatever reason, one way or another, whether you started it because it was interesting and now you're in a bad situation or not. So if we could legalize it, a lot of people, I'm not the only one, and there's a lot of evidence to support that if it was legalized, you could have protections.
Yes.
If it was legalized, you could get health care and health insurance, and it wouldn't necessarily be a source of disease and a lot of other risks. So one last thing I want to bring up, though, because in just as a slightly different angle to highlight the way that we really put blame on women in this country a lot, and I put that on the responsibility of men earlier, but you corrected me that it is women as well. So at the what is it? CES, Consumer Electronics Showcase in Las Vegas, they awarded a woman's robotics company for the best robotics award for a vibrator, right? And a month later, I guess after the award was given, the company received an email from the awards show, the CES, saying that we're going to take this back. It's obscene. It doesn't really reflect the image that we want to present and everything like this. All this really like kind of insulting, a lot of shade being thrown, like we're taking this back. This was clearly a mistake on our part. We never should have done this. And it's a high-tech, really advanced robotic device. I'm not going to get into all this because, maybe my mom is listening or something like that. It'll be awkward. But it's high-tech. It won an award because it's got a lot of skills, right? Meanwhile, so then they took that back because they were embarrassed or whatever. But meanwhile, at this same CES, Consumer Electronics Showcase, they have male-oriented sexual presentations all the time. Dolls.
What?
They've had presentations where you can at the company's little stand like be watching porn right there in the hallway next to the other booths. So this is another way that like we find when it comes to sex, we find all types of ways to demonize and vilify women's role in it. But anything that men inherently find interesting or is focused towards men, we deem appropriate. And that gets again at underlying issues of a lot of these things, And these are what we need to be aware of. So when men or women apologize, make excuses for R. Kelly or why it's not what it is, or for victims, why they aren't what they say they are, this and that, we got to really do the hard work of stepping back and checking ourselves and realize and maybe finding analogies in other aspects of our society where maybe we don't think the same way, and then take that line and apply it here to issues of sexuality and rape culture and all this. It's a complicated
We could literally
topic.
be having a conversation around like why women's sexuality is so misunderstood in America for the rest of in the world for the rest
really.
of this whole entire day. Like we could go on and on and on. It's just so many ways. So, you know what, Steve?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. So let's shift. We got two more stories. Like I said, we're going to talk about the shutdown because everybody's talking about the shutdown. We got to give you the inside scoop. If you haven't, you know what's happening pretty much. But the next story I want to jump into real quick is in Washington, D.C., first 8 days of 2019, there were 8 homicides.
8 days, 8 homicides.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this has been really the continuation of a spike in homicides from 2018. And, to me, this is a question about how are we handling crime and violence as a society, and like, are police doing a good job? Are they doing the right job? Are they doing what they should be doing to address this? I guess there's an aspect that can be more community focused as far as why are your neighbors or my neighbors or our family members or whoever committing this crime. But to me, this is, I look at it kind of up from the outside because I'm not from DC native, so I'm still working on building roots and things like that. So for me, sort of an outsider, I look at this from the sky view, sort of what is the city as a society, as an institution, right, as government, as groups of people and everything doing to address the root causes of this kind of violence. And last year in 2018, to try and combat this, the police response was, we'll put more officers on the street. And that didn't do anything. And so here, the ball drops, and January 1, we got a death. We got a homicide, right? January 2, They didn't all happen one on each day.
Yeah.
One day there were 2, and then January 8th we got 8 homicides now, and so I don't think that's the right response. And earlier in 2019, earlier last week, the mayor and the police chief's response was, well, we need to focus on illegal guns. But 3 of the homicides had nothing to do with guns. They weren't gun violence.
Yeah.
2 people were found in a burning house from, I believe, like asphyxiation and blunt force trauma.
That was done deliberately?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they were killed, and then I guess the fire was set.
Wow.
And another man was stabbed. And one of the killings was at the Marine barracks. Apparently a misfire. So a soldier out at Marine barracks was shot and killed by some accident, at least according to I don't know if things have developed since then, but the initial reporting said it was just some kind of misfire with equipment from another Marine.
That's considered a homicide?
They're counting it in these statistics.
Okay.
So this to me just, if they're coming out and saying, well, in order to combat this, we're going to focus on illegal guns, but 3 of the killings weren't gun violence at all, it makes me question already, what the hell are you talking about? Mm-hmm. Like, what is your motivation for even responding right now? Because it just doesn't sound attached to reality.
Yeah.
What about the stabbing at 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon? What about the stabbing, right? What about the 2 people in a house murdered by bare hands, or a hammer or whatever it was from the blunt force and everything? You come out and talk about guns. Yeah, there was a lot of gun violence in 2018, but are you just stuck in your own feedback loop? And this is just what you're kind of used to saying. Well, these are the problems. These are the solutions. A new problem. Well, these are the problems. These are solutions. It seems like they're just stuck in their own repetitive mindset, and we need better ideas.
I just formulated an idea, and it's totally, it's not off topic, but I don't know how factual it is. It's a question, really, of how this type of violence and homicides are related to, A, poverty, and B, trauma. Because when you really want to get to the root of, like, when you want to solve a problem, you want to get to the root cause of the problem. And I don't think the root cause is guns. I think the root cause is what triggers a person to want to murder another person, other than just vengeance and anger. Like, what's the correlation of being impoverished and the likelihood to commit murder? And what's the correlation of being a victim of trauma yourself and the likelihood to commit murder? That's something that I personally would want to do research on and figure out, what can we actually do to stop the issue at the root versus being reactionary?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
And that's kind of what I was getting at the beginning here, is we need to be smarter about this, right? Not harder. Don't work harder, more police, more hours. We need to be smarter how we address those. And I mean, there's a lot of scholarship and research that says most crime in general is economic related, right? People aren't just like coming home from work, pet the dog, pay the rent, and go do some crime. Like, it's not how it happens,
that's
right?
what I'm
People
saying.
need stuff. Now, some of it maybe is just mental health, and maybe they're not really in the best mind state. People get angry and they get in altercations and things happen, but most crime is economic related, A. I don't know about homicides and murders specifically about that, but yeah, we need to look at this from the root cause issue. And so the NEAR Act is one way that a couple cities have been trying to address it from like a public health perspective, right? So the NEAR Act is the Neighborhood Engagement Achieves Results Act. So the idea of this is applying strategies like sending mental health experts out to a lot of calls with police officers. It's about training and organizing, this is not the right word, but like interventionists in neighborhoods. So if you have high crime neighborhoods where this is a concern, you train people in the community who can also be contacted in addition to or before police to come and try and calm things down or get to the root of what's happening before violence occurs, right? So if you have people who are in tension and conflict, you can get maybe one of these people to come out and intervene who knows both parties maybe, and approach these things as the social problems they are. And social meaning what? Like, you got a social life, right? It means you go out with your friends and people you know.
Right.
Social interactions with people that you know or don't know, strangers, but out and not as just some light switch on, light switch off. Are you committing crime or not committing crime? And that's how a lot of police responses are now.
Yeah.
It's just, is it crime or is it not crime? And they don't show, like the resistance to the NEAR Act, the city has been sued a couple times for its failure to actually live up to and fulfill the NEAR Act, which has been passed in law in D.C.
Yeah.
They're not collecting data that they're supposed to. They're not making other moves that this legislation calls for. And you got to wonder, why would you be so resistant? If law enforcement, if police are about bettering the community, protecting the community, there's other ways to do it. Like there's a phrase, if you've ever heard this used, called like the better part of valor, meaning like you can, it's used in a context of like sometimes it's smarter to wait, or sometimes it's better to be cautious or patient. You know, you may be brave, but it's not always about running in head first. And this is on my mind because I just heard somebody say it the other day. And so I'm thinking, as a police officer, the better part of valor here is not just continuing to put yourself at more risk and running into the fight, but maybe stepping back and saying, okay, what else can we do to help people, right? You shouldn't just view yourself as a hammer, right? Because then everything is a nail. And
ooh,
I mean, that's not mine, right?
Oh, I thought it was.
Yeah, you've never heard? Oh,
no,
that one goes way back.
Dang.
Yeah, that's good. You know, everything is a nail to a hammer.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the problem here. So, and especially where a lot of the gun violence is in D.C., we know a lot of other very obvious problemes, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of public services that don't have funding. There's not a lot of economic prosperity for a number of reasons. So it's like if you look where crime happens and where it doesn't and take crime out of the picture and compare the differences, it just seems right there like, okay, well, let's just talk about the differences. But law enforcement seems 100% committed to the fact that it's on or off, crime or not crime. Is crime happening or is it not happening? You there. Are you committing crime or not? And even then, they don't care. They see you and they think maybe you're committing crime.
How can you change that? Like, I feel like law enforcement has been looking at crime in that way. I don't want to speak, like, since the beginning of time. Like, hasn't that always been how law enforcement has looked at crime? Like, yes, no, check box, check box.
You know, I'm not a historian about law enforcement, but, I mean, I know in the past they had better experience and ties in the community. And one of the changes from some of the reading I've done is when police went from literally walking the beat to being in police cars and now separated themselves, right? So whereas they used to literally walk through neighborhoods, you know, stop in the store and just see how you're doing as they walk and do their rounds through a neighborhood, that I think to some degree forced social connections, right? And the problem to me is if you're just in your squad car all day, like it's a guard tower, right, waiting for a reason you have to get out, then every time you get out, it's probably going to be more tension. You almost maybe like psychologically associate, I'm out of my car. Why am I out of my car? I don't get out of my car unless there's problems, right?
Yeah.
This is not every cop. This is not every officer. And this is not necessarily written down in the code to happen, but it can serve to have that effect. The same way road rage happens, right? We're in our cars, we're isolated, and we can get so angry at other drivers. But if we're walking down the street, we would never react that way to a person that's being rude walking on the sidewalk, right?
Right.
So that's groundbreaking analogy right there. I don't think anyone has ever made this.
Maybe they have, but you know what, Steve? My mind is
here.
spinning because I'm like, you know what?
I'm taking credit for that. So yeah, you know, if you think about the disconnect, right, that they have, to say nothing of the fact that law enforcement doesn't necessarily live in the towns that they enforce now.
Yes.
Which happens because of economics, and I get that. And if that leads to less sympathy and less compassion in their doing their job, then that's an unfortunate byproduct of economic situations that force us to all be commuting crazy hours into places that we don't live and we never spend time. So that's a lot. Any what else do you have? What's on your mind about this? Do you have anything?
I mean, I'm just taking in the information that you give me and trying to figure out how can we fix it. Because again, law enforcement in the United States, we're looking at them with a side eye and have been for the past 5 years.
Yeah.
So when are we going to see some resolve? If you can sit at this table and come up with, I like what you just said, like walk the beat. Like, what are you doing? Get out, community policing, live where you work, which, you know, there are reasons. But if we can come up with these types of solutions quickly, why can't we actually see change? Why aren't we seeing, and there's been hardly any change in the way that we police in America for decades.
Well, there's been a lot of change, but it's been towards more technology and more weaponry.
I'm talking about positive resolve. Like, we want to see solutions to the problems that we've
they're
been
out there
screaming at the wall about forever.
They're out there wondering what new toys they can get all the time. But so all right. So last point on this issue. Last Saturday evening, I went to the campaign launch for the anti-stop and frisk campaign that they're going to be doing in D.C., which is a super problematic approach. It's been outlawed in New York. It's all about profiling, and it really unfairly targets people that are probably just minding their own business most of the time. Not probably. There's research to prove that. So what can we do? I mean, we got the NEAR Act passed. I didn't get the NEAR Act passed. A lot of great organizers and activists in D.C. and policy makers got the NEAR Act passed in D.C. Now it's about finding ways legislatively or legally to hold them accountable to living up to those aspects of that policy. But in this anti-stop and frisk campaign now, they're looking for people to plug in to help do some research, to help get out to local D.C. elected officials and have these conversations with them at local ANC meetings, at monthly this meeting, at that committee, here and there. So they need a lot of help, and there's a number of organizations involved in that, but it's spearheaded by the Stop Police Terror Project. So they do good work, and for some people that phrase, Stop Police Terror Project, might sound scary and real extra and anti-American even, or it might sound like they're a terrorist, right?
Right.
But the fact of the matter is they are focused 100% on the conversation we're having right now. And like, I got to credit them for a lot of the things on my mind about this issue because they're doing the good work. So it may, for some people, sound like an intimidating and very divisive title for your like nonprofit organization that wants to help people, but they're really doing good work. So I do want to have one of them on the show, somebody who can represent that campaign coming up soon. So I'm in contact with those people. So stay tuned to What's the Deal for more updates on that and how we can get involved in that campaign, because to me it's very important. So
just when we thought it was over.
Yeah, last story, folks. This is good. Want a good roll here. We want to get to the shutdown because obviously that's the MAGA big elephant in the room.
Jesus. Okay, so people, the United States government has officially been shut down for 22 days. Today is Saturday, January 12th, making this today the longest government shutdown that the United States has ever seen. The previous record was held by the December 1995 shutdown, which lasted for 21 days. So we literally are record breaking. We are breaking that news to you right now. You heard it here first, people. Literally the United States government has been shut down. And there are people out there who still don't know that it's shut down and who still don't know what that actually means. So we really kind of want to clarify, what does that mean?
Okay, so you were telling me a good story about this yesterday, right?
Yeah. I just want to make it real for you all because you might think, oh, the United States government is shut down. That means like, oh, we can't go to Capitol Hill, or maybe it has something to do with the White House. I don't know. No, the government shutdown actually affects many, many people in daily ways, especially here in Washington, D.C. and the surrounding areas, because obviously this is where the government is. Someone that I know was recently laid off who doesn't even work for the United States government. As a direct result of the government being shut down, their company or their department got absorbed by another organization that usually outsources their work to them. But because the government is shut down, that company can no longer afford to outsource the work, so they had to make it all internal, which means the department that my friend works for no longer exists. And every single person who works at this company that has nothing to do with the government was laid off. They will not be getting paid.
No heads up.
No heads up. Like that day, hey, sorry, your company got absorbed, your department got absorbed, we got to let you go. Here's your box, holla back. Like that same day.
Yeah, that's rough. And a lot of the government workers will be getting back pay.
Yeah.
But the trick is, if you your friend in that situation, if you work for a contractor of the government, those contractors have no record of doing back pay because they're not, presumably as the employers, they're not getting that money from the federal government because they didn't do the work. Right. So there's no money for them to back pay you. The federal government has the money. They just need to pay their workers back pay. But for the contractors, now there's a gap here missing. No service rendered by the contractor, no money from the government, no money to back pay the workers. So, and these people are who? the maintenance crew, cleanup crew, custodians. These are cafeteria workers who, and a lot of these workers are getting minimum wage, don't have benefits in a lot of cases. So these people for sure
they're not getting
are in
that
a
back
vulnerable
pay.
status,
Right.
really day to day, regardless, just because your budget is tight.
And the thing is, even the people who do work for the federal government, there is no guarantee that they're going to receive that back pay. Like historically, for all the days that they weren't able to come to work, they've received back pay, but there are instances where that has not occurred, and there is no way of knowing if that's going to happen this year. You get what I'm saying? So those people could be SOL too.
Yeah.
And then it begs the question, like, why? Some people may already be clear on why the government is shut down, but just for those of you who may not, President Trump has requested over $5 billion for funding so that he can build the border wall for, down in the south of the United States. And they haven't come to an agreement. The Democrats are basically giving him a lot of pushback. And he's saying, all right, until someone gives me a final answer, i.e. the answer that I want to hear, bitch better have my money. The government is shut down. It may be shut down for months or maybe even years. Arms crossed, toddler style, storms out of the room. This might go on for an endless amount of time. So basically what we're hoping for to see it into this is that he says, all right, I'm tripping. I'm going to open the government back up. I might not get my money. I'm going to figure out another way to do it because it's very unlikely that he's going to be approved for $5 billion to build this wall.
So in this case, I mean, we've seen other shutdowns, right? 2013 was a long shutdown over Obamacare.
Yeah.
But what we had there was at least a room full of standard politicians who are susceptible to standard political pressure. And Trump is not that at all. And like I just finished reading a book by Michael Lewis called The Fifth Risk. Mm-hmm. And this book outlines, and this is one of the best journalists in the country. He's written a ton of books. Is on point. He's accurate in the things that he writes and says. This whole book essentially outlines the way that the whole Trump administration is not really paying much attention to the nitty-gritty, the details of how government runs. Mm-hmm. So the people he's appointing to head certain agencies are not spending the weeks, months, sometimes years in the past that it takes to work with your predecessor to transition so that you can run this organization efficiently. They're not even sending the whole team over there, let alone is the people they sent to these departments spending the time they need to get up to speed to understand how to run these agencies. So if this is what he's doing at every level of the rest of the government, I'm worried, like, what would happen in the world to get him to back down off of this cliff.
Right. Yes.
Because Mitch McConnell, John Boehner, all those other guys who've been involved in some of these shutdowns, like they were still standard politicians and still had some kind of calculus of risk and urgency. But I really genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, from all the journalism I've read and from this book, I believe that Trump himself has no idea some of these impacts even that we're talking about just now. I don't think he even understands it. I mean, this is a guy who has proudly claimed he doesn't have time or interest to read books. I mean, where do you get information from? You're running the entire country. You got to know some stuff. And
right.
You got to get it from somewhere. And you got to read something, right? So, like, this is a man who just seems totally willing to go off his complete instinct alone and no other real information or knowledge and experience. And I don't know. I'm worried. It's going to end eventually.
It's going to end.
But maybe it won't. I don't know. This is one case where you can say, I don't know, maybe it won't.
No, it's going to end. There's even been some talk around him using some military funding, like playing around with the budget and saying, okay, I'm going to allocate these $5 million or these $5 billion or however much to build the border wall. And then, of course, he will be able to open the government because he found a loophole and another way to get the funding that he needed because at the end of the day, unfortunately, he's the president. So, you know what I'm saying? It's really scary. Yeah.
On that point, to be honest with you, I don't care if he builds a wall or not. I don't want it to be through my okay or my politicians and officials writing off and agreeing to it. But at the same time, if like we woke up tomorrow and like a miracle of God, came down and God just snapped his fingers and put a wall there, I'm not going to lose much sleep. A, people say it's not really an effective way anyway. And B, I mean, to what extent it's a deterrent, people are going to find their way in to claim asylum or to do whatever they have to do anyway. So I'd rather people not get detained. I'd rather all this detention stop than not have the wall. And not saying that those are the negotiations I will go into, but if he found some crazy way to do it, I mean, I would just kind of shrug, throw up my hands, and let's keep moving on about this. But because the other thing is $5 billion, $5 billion, right, is a tiny fraction of like the U.S. budget overall. So while it sounds like a lot of money to most of us, considering how much the government, I mean, the defense budget is $700 billion.
Yeah.
That's just the defense budget. We've got budgets for a whole bunch of other stuff that don't nearly come close to $700 billion, but we need he wants $5 billion for the wall. It sounds like a lot in this political, wrangling right now, but it's also not a lot as far as the U.S. government is used to spending. So I'm not saying I want Democrats to cave on this. I don't really think it's their issue to cave on, because they're just standing here and this guy is manufacturing some crisis because it's just a political campaign promise that he made. And that's really it.
Yeah.
Right? He's manufacturing this crisis. They're saying 4,000 terrorists are coming across the border all the time, which, I mean, they're making up outlandish numbers.
What?
They're making up numbers that have no basis in reality, if you're being honest. They have basis in reality if you're trying to be slick and twist a lot of things, but $5 billion is not a lot of money. So I'm not saying that the Democrats should just say, okay, here, take it, but it's important to realize that. However you feel about the border wall, right? Maybe you like the border wall, but you don't like the way this negotiation is going down. Mm-hmm. Or maybe, almost sort of like me, you kind of don't care either way about it, but you'd rather not support it. Or maybe you're just saying that's just too much money. For context, $5 billion is not a lot of money.
Well, wall, like you said, the wall isn't here nor there for me when we're talking about this shutdown. The thing that I just want to make sure that I keep reiterating and drive home is how does this affect us? What does that mean for an everyday person like me? I don't work for the government, but how, what does this have to do with my life? And there's lots of ways that this can play into my life. For example, this may not affect you, but aviation is one of the agencies that's been shut down. People are being forced to go to work still without pay, like the TSA workers. They still have to go to work because their job is considered crucial, but they're not getting paid for it, which means now so many people are calling out from work. People are entering this country.
They've been quitting as well, and at TSA
Literally,
specifically.
wow.
I was just reading that now, in addition to hearing all week that they're calling out sick, which is an awesome move of protest. I totally support that. A lot of people are quitting on top of that.
It's not fair.
Other unions, labor unions that are federal workers, there's 2 lawsuits saying that this is illegal to be forcing them to work without pay. So one of them being air traffic controllers. I can't remember the other union. So there is some acts of resistance going on, but that's interfering with people's travel, right? If you need to go to the airport. It's also, I mean, if you're all about the safety of America, which he claims to be trying to prevent terrorists. We know terrorists since 9/11, the big focus has been at airports.
So if you don't have security there,
he's putting us literally in jeopardy.
Right.
So it's like now 6 of one, half dozen of another. He's like, oh, you guys are letting terrorists in through the border, which is not happening. And in response to that, he's now shut the government down, which arguably could lead to allowing terrorists in through the airports, which is opposite of what he's claiming to do. So I'll tell you, to wrap this up, one last way that this can affect everyday people on the street is your water might get shut off. Think about this. If you live at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, that's the White House. The government hasn't paid their water bill. So I was reading this. They have a $5 million bill with DC Water that they notified DC Water they won't be paying right now. And this is hilarious because people are joking, well, we've got 30 days. What is it? Let me scroll to the right information. Under DC law, the water authority may shut off water to a customer for non-payment after 30 days.
How long have they gone?
Well, 21, I guess now. Well, we don't know when the payment was due.
Oh, my
Shutdown
God.
is at 21. So this is real, man. You know, if you live in the White House, you might have your water shut off.
Bye, Steve.
This
That's
is how
not real life stuff. But you know what is real life stuff? That people may go without more than just water. People may go without food and housing, considering that the Section 8 and the food stamp program is good up until February 1st. But after that, without funding, people who are a part of those programs may or likely will not be receiving their benefits at all in the month of March, perhaps even the month of February, which means people are going to starve. You know what I'm saying? People are going to go without water. In real life, we can barely drink the water in D.C. coming out of the faucet. If you don't have bottled water or Brita water, you might literally not have water.
Yes,
and,
nasty.
That's kind of not a joke.
Anyway, I was just trying to bring some levity into the situation here as we
okay.
wrap up, okay? Because I would love that. I think that would be brilliant if they literally cut off the water at the White House for not paying their bills. That would be awesome. I mean, Trump drinks probably bottled water all the time, barely. If you remember that video clip of him struggling with that bottle of water a while back, that was hilarious. But that would be great, and I would super applaud D.C. lawmakers and authorities if they decided that they were going to shut down the water. We know that won't happen because in
Who would it hurt? Who would it actually hurt? Trump's got like 12 houses, so.
True. He'd go to Mar-a-Lago, I guess.
Exactly.
So we've covered a lot of ground today.
Yes, we have, and I'm tired. We back in the swing of things, baby.
We're back. So, look, thanks for everybody tuning in. We tried a little experiment here with Instagram Live while we were taping this, so shout out to some of the people I see here. DJ Soul, SIE Covington, Mommy Cheech. So shout out to just some of those viewers. We're going to be back next week with who knows what type of shenanigans we're going to have to discuss. Hopefully not the shutdown. We're going to be, you know what? We're going to speak into existence. Next Saturday, we're going to be recording, talking about how the shutdown got resolved.
Yes, Steve. I like
that.
Right?
Because this is what you got to do. What is it? Manifest?
Manifesting.
Yeah, you got to manifest
You've been around me.
Yeah, I'm not so hard-headed, see? So that's what we're going to be back next week discussing, the end of the shutdown. We're also going to have, some brilliant guest, no doubt. We also want to have a conversation about the state of education in this country as well.
We absolutely will.
We're
yes,
planning.
We will.
We've got some, crack team of experts that we're discussing with right now and planning. So definitely that's going to be on the horizon. Maybe not next Saturday, but
it's coming.
It's coming. So until next week, I guess, I am Steve Discourse.
And I am Jay Callie.
And that's the deal. Peace.